What's the weirdest thing a medical professional has casually said to you? Story 1. If you want to help people, don't go into medicine. As a doctor, I'm nothing more than a people mechanic, and much like a car mechanic, I patch people back together well enough to get them out the door until I see them again. If I could go back, I'd run as far away from medicine as I could. Edit. Well, this gained more traction than I expected. For context, this sentiment was offered to me by a 70-year-old, 40-plus year tenured physician who was on more boards than I care to list and was a very well-respected surgeon. As many in the comments have stated, his distaste for the job had very much to do with the long list of hoops that he had to jump through in order to perform even the most basic treatments. And yes, the endless charting was exhaustive to witness, much less perform. He also went so far as to send a hospital-wide email asking any physician who had the time to sit in a meeting with all of the pre-med people who had dedicated the most time to shadowing for a brief back and forth. Asked a few questions along the lines of, who's unhappy with their job? How many have been divorced? How many think you're overworked? How many would go back to med school, especially with a debt load today? And a few more questions that painted a very, at least with this group of 40-plus people, realistic picture of how unhappy they all were. At least 80% raised their hands in favor of the most negative option presented, and briefly attested to how bad and how hard the job had been. And of those that were heavily in favor of the job, I'd say at least 80% were quite obviously there for the money and nothing more. I still have an immense respect for those who choose to work in healthcare, but I'm also glad I steered away from it, especially when I consider that I would have entered residency in the midst of a pandemic. Ew. You know what I think if a doctor said this to me? I would respect and trust them more. A German friend of mine was a car mechanic to surgeon pipeline. And he said he got tired of working on cars, so wanted to work on people. He'd taken the required test to qualify for med school and kept it in his back pocket in case he got tired of being a mechanic. So it worked out for him. Really cool guy, super unique. Comes off like a loud metalhead. One of the smartest and nicest guys I know. Isn't it true that most jobs, or at least when you're starting out on these jobs, have some aspect of it that you don't want to do, like paperwork or something? I think there's more and more of this probably in healthcare, especially with how much money there is to be made of it and how people need to keep track of this stuff in order to make that money. And I think that is what puts pressure on the people who actually want to be doctors and actually want to help people instead of having to fill out forms and charts. Story 2. Was living in a foreign country and had a cold or flu type illness. Went to the doc and he came in eating a bowl of cereal. Already weird. Checks some things and says, "Do you know what AIDS is?" I'm in complete shock and say, "Yes, I do." He follows up with, "It's a virus, and there's no cure." Goes on to explain why there's no cure, all the while I'm seeing my life over as I know it. Finally ends with, "But you don't have that virus. You have a different one, much more common and treatable. But I wanted you to understand why an antibiotic wouldn't work." Still in shock, I'm like, "So I don't have AIDS then, right?" He goes, "No," and walks out. What a roller coaster. Edit. This was in Switzerland about 15 years ago, and I'm American. Yes, he was slurping his cereal the whole time. Edit 2. He did explain the difference between HIV and AIDS. Guess he just wanted to come in hot and get my attention. Thanks all. Yeah, I went to a intimate health checkup, and the doc just started listing each possible STI before finishing with, "You don't have those." For some reason, they love to act like it's a game show. "Herpes, we tested you for herpes. Did we see herpes?" "No herpes, but what about gonorrhea? Do we see gonorrhea?" Could you imagine if there was like a board like that, like Family Feud up on there, and the doctor is giving you all of that, and he has it set up on remote control. Not even like a computer screen that's set up to look like it, but like an actual physical board, complete with a buzzer and everything. I actually wouldn't mind that. It would kind of make the doctor's visit a little more exciting, to be honest. That's depending on the outcome, of course. Story 3. Not me, but Mom. She's in remission for a non-Hodgkin's lymphoma that invaded her brain. Ooh. She was getting a scan to confirm the cancer had left her brain pan, and the doctor came in and said, "Good news! We scanned your brain and confirmed that there's nothing in there." I know he was joking, but there was at least one instance where a patient walked into a clinic to get a brain scan to figure out why he had headaches, only for all the doctors to be absolutely shocked when it looked like he had no brain, just an empty skull. Turns out the guy had a condition where fluid would leak and build up in his skull. He used to have this fluid regularly drained, but he either stopped going or his doctors falsely assumed he was cured. I don't remember. As the fluid slowly built up over the years, it just kind of slowly pushed his brain until it was lining the inside of his skull. The brain is squishy enough and the fluid buildup was just slow enough that it didn't affect his physical or mental capabilities at all until there was no room left for his brain to go. The headaches were from his brain slowly being crushed against his skull. No idea how the guy is doing now or how they treated that issue. My assumption would be that you can't just drain all the fluid at once without causing brain damage, but I'm not a doctor. I was once in an accident where I fell and had to be x-rayed to see if there was any damage to my head, and I did get that joke of good news, there's nothing in there. Yeah, I was actually kind of expecting it. I think that's probably also news that also led me to believe that I would be all right even before the x-ray came out. Story 4. When my girlfriend was in the ICU, one of the nurses sort of shrugged and said dismissively, "She's gonna pass away anyhow." She should have. Her kidneys had shut completely down, and she was so swollen that her tongue wouldn't fit in her mouth. We were making the decision whether to continue life support or not. She didn't pass away. A month and a half later, she walked out of the hospital and into my car for the ride home. When I was in the hospital with COVID, my nurse told me to either breathe or expire, but I needed to choose because she was busy. When my kidneys were failing, my doctor sat me down and described my treatment plan to me, then looked me in the eye and told me that it was totally all right if I refused treatment, but I would definitely pass away if I did. Had a doc say once, "You don't have to stay for observation. You can leave any time you want, but if you walk out that door, there's nothing I can do to help you." Weird story. I left anyway, but made a follow-up appointment with a cardiologist, and they wouldn't take me without insurance. Every doc since has said my heart is fine, so I have to assume it was the amount of alcohol I was drinking at the time. Story 5. Doc, do you know what AIDS is? Patient, yeah, sweating. Doc, well, you should be happy to know the good news is you don't have that. Patient, that's a good thing, I guess. Doc, the bad news is that you probably have cancer. Doc, on phone, I have some bad news and some worse news for you. Patient, okay, what's the bad news? Doc, I have your test results and the report says you probably have about 7 days or so left to live. Patient, oh my deity, if that's bad news, what the hell is the worst news? Doc, I meant to call you last week. Doc, I have some bad news. You better sit down. Patient, what is it, Doc? Doc, you have very little time left. Patient, oh my deity, how long do I have? Doc, 5. Patient, 5 what? Years? Months? Doc, 4, 3, 2. Story 6. My surgeon, during surgery to replace pins in my broken finger that had been pushed out by my own body. I'm really getting them in there this time, you little freak of nature. I would kind of be flattered by this. Also, did you make a lot of Wolverine jokes, or did the pins get pushed in a direction that wasn't along your fingers? Sadly, they were put in to hold the bone in place so it could heal. The pinholes healed too fast and pushed the pins out of position so they weren't holding the bone where it needed to be. I looked more like a knockoff Edward Scissorhands than Wolverine. My doctor asked me, male, if I had been hit in the taint. I was young and didn't know what a taint was. So he said, you know, it taint vagina and it taint butt. You can't ask a kid if they've been hit in the perineum. Hell, you can't ask an average adult that, but it's still a relevant question. Source: I'm a doctor. I'd rather there would be a comment for an operation like this. I'm really getting him in there this time, to just casually saying, I'll just replace him and sees what happens. It sounds like he's just invested in the patient's health in a unusual sort of way. I'd be into that. Story 7. Back pain. I'm not young. Doctor just said basically, well, that's just life for you. You're tall. So I'm just going to end up being hunched over 90 years old? You're not going to see 90. Pardon? How many tall old people have you ever seen? Oh, yeah. Okay. How tall are you? I'm a 6-foot-tall woman, and I think about this a lot. There are no tall old ladies. Just little olds. Edit. Everyone chiming in to give me hope of a long life. I love you. Reminder. You shrink as you age. Those little old ladies used to be taller. Very true. My great-aunt was 6'7" at her tallest, but 5'11" when she passed away at 95. Dig her bones up and get her on the court. This is the most out-of-pocket thing I've ever read. Story 8. After destroying my knee riding BMX at 17, the emergency surgeon said, wow, you really fracked that up. 10 years later, and another serious knee injury from riding. I saw the same surgeon. He did a great job on the first one. First words out of his mouth were, I remember you. Fracked up the other one, huh? I like this guy. He waited 10 years for that moment. Damn, I don't know how I'd feel knowing I fracked up enough to be remembered by an emergency surgeon. Not great. I literally broke my knee 90 degrees sideways. It had to be forced straight by him, then immediately into surgery to repair basically every ligament and piece of soft tissue in there. Luckily, I didn't get a fake knee at 17 from that one. Since I'm not sure which knee this was, I just gripped both of mine in horror to be safe. Hope that's cool. Story 9. If you don't mind, I'd like to show everyone pictures of your tonsils. According to her, I had the most disgusting tonsils she had ever seen in her years in the business. And gosh darn, she wanted to show them off. I had a similar experience at a dentist. I apparently had a very rare problem, and even the oldest doctor had only seen this 2 times in her life. For the next few sessions, all other doctors were called in and he showed them it. I was fine with it, but it was an odd situation sitting on the dentist chair while 4 doctors and a few nurses were around you and looked very interested in what will happen next. So I was the real-life example for a textbook lecture. My husband has 2 rare chronic illnesses, and his doctor had the residents try to diagnose what he has based on his symptoms. None of them got it right. He said it was kind of funny to watch them all trying to get it right. Did they start with lupus? Story 10. This is the part where all your dignity goes out the window. I'm going to tape your penis to your abdomen. They did this to me along with my nads during butthole surgery. Fun times. Just a fissure that got infected. Fistula. They ended up removing a few centimeters of tissue and muscle and sewing it back together, basically cutting my butthole in half. I have celiac and have been having issues. Anyhow, since my junk would get in the way in the position they put me in to do the surgery, they had to tape the whole unit out of the way. When I got the snip, I was told to drop my drawers and lie on a table in the other room. The gentleman, doctor, walked into the room, taped my dong to my abdomen, and then introduced himself as Dr. So-and-so. I said, I hope so. Starts pulling. I'm going to be taping your penis to your throat. Congratulations.
Please like and subscribe if you've made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the video and have a wonderful day.
Story 11. This reads like a great sitcom skit. Lucille. Not Dr. Wordsmith. How's my son? Dr. Fishman. He's going to be all right. Lindsay. Finally, some good news from this guy. George Michael. There's no other way to take that. Dr. Fishman, that's a great attitude. I've got to tell you, if I was getting this news, I don't know that I'd take it this well. Lucille, but you said he was all right. Dr. Fishman, yes, he's lost his left hand, so he's going to be all right. Story 12. Reminds me of a time when I took my cat to the vet. It was time for him to get sterilized, but during the appointment, the vet discovered that his testicles had never descended. It caused a small sensation in that office, and every single vet and trainee vet in that office wanted to feel his empty ball sack. After the second person copped a feel, my cat started squirming. By the fifth, he drew blood. All right, the vet said as she withdrew her shredded finger. I guess we deserve that. Oh, sure, they're all understanding when your cat gets upset about his balls being fondled, but when it's me, apparently I have an attitude problem. Happened to me, too, except with a mass in my toe. Apparently, that sort of mass doesn't really show up in toes on top of being rare to begin with. The doctors seem to have shown my scans and test results to quite a few people. Story 13. I live in Ireland. The surgeon who replaced my hip is also a farmer. The day before I was due to be discharged, he came in on his rounds. He said, I may not see you tomorrow. It depends on the dog. So I said, okay, what's up with the dog? He told me the dog broke his leg and was having it set tomorrow, but he wasn't sure what time, so I said, sure, bring in the old dog and I'll mind him. This is rural Ireland, bear in mind, and I was in the convalescent area of the hospital by then. And shortly after breakfast, he arrived with the dog. Lovely border collie, with his leg in plaster. He stayed with me watching TV till the doc was finished replacing another hip and was ready to discharge me and we could all go home. It could only happen in Ireland. There's an ophthalmologist on TikTok who plays a bunch of different doctors, and my favorite is rural medicine. People pay him in crops or other non-monetary goods, and the only MRI is at the Texaco shop. See Dr. Glaucomflecken. Story 14. When I was 20, my endocrinologist took a good look at me and asked, Are you okay with your face being so asymmetrical? I'd never noticed it before, but boy, have I noticed it since. Thanks for the complex, butthole. Same here. The dentist said I like the top part of your face, but not the bottom part. Since then, I'm very aware of my mouth and chin. After 30 years, I still hear him say it. He probably meant that your jaw is messing your teeth up a little bit. Likely in a way only dentists would ever notice or care about. One of my patients, I'm a nurse, was noted as being unremarkable by a doctor, and was so genuinely hurt that I got the doctor to explain to her and that he liked her very much but didn't think she had anything to worry about. Story 15. My previous OB-GYN came through my line at my old job. For some reason, I blanked on who he was. Like, I knew him, but for the life of me, I couldn't remember how. He saw I was struggling and said, Don't remember me? I'll give you a hint. Last time I saw you, you were in my office with your ankles in the air. Loudly, in front of a line of little old ladies fresh from church wanting to buy flowers from the garden center. He was an amazing doc and figured out what was wrong with me when no other doc could. But in that moment, the embarrassment could have unalived me. Being a knowledgeable doctor and being socially inept often go hand in hand. Story 16. A nurse of some kind took my blood pressure. He said what the numbers were. I asked, Is that good? He said, I'm not qualified to give you a professional opinion on the matter. You should ask your doctor. I asked, But, unprofessionally, is that good? He said, Unprofessionally? Well, in my purely personal opinion that I'm sharing with you as an individual and not in any medical or official capacity whatsoever, you should buy stronger deodorant. Edit. For clarity, I was definitely stinky. I was homeless at the time. I was well aware of this fact. If you're worried you're a little funky, don't. You would almost assuredly notice if you smelled really bad. Story 17. I had a doctor tell me that my metabolism is so slow that I would do very well in an apocalypse. My doctor told me this was when he noticed my chronic low body temperature and asked me other questions about weight gain and pooping frequency. He said, Some people are just built to hibernate. You're just, hibernating all the time. This was in the same conversation where he diagnosed me with a sleep disorder, too. Can't even hibernate properly. Somehow, a few of my old coworkers and I would make poop jokes and were very comfortable with each other when one of them claimed she would only go once a week. She was shocked that I'd go multiple times a day. My stomach hurts thinking of not going at least once a day. Story 18. Oof. Unfortunately, he has a point. For a while, I knew a guy who was over 6'5" and worked as a genetic counselor. One time we were chatting and he just casually mentioned that he wasn't expecting to get terribly old. He knew the statistics because of his job, and the odds are not good for people over 6 foot. On the other hand, that's just averages, not an individual outcome. Plenty of short people perish in car accidents in their 20s, and plenty of tall people live well into old age. Plenty of short people perish in car accidents in their 20s? Feet just couldn't reach the brake pedal. Story 19. I had a really weird throat issue. It didn't hurt, it just felt like something was stuck in there. I'd been a vegetarian for years at this point, and the doctor said I likely had a chicken bone stuck in there. Wouldn't take no for an answer. Haven't you heard? Humans will unknowingly eat an average of 7 chickens in our lifetimes due to them crawling into our mouths while we sleep. #science, #facts. That's actually not true. Chicken-eating George, who eats an average of 10,000 chickens every night, is an outlier who shouldn't have been included in the review. Story 20. Doctor, you look great. How did you lose weight? Son, eating disorder, anorexia. Doctor, well, keep doing whatever you're doing. It's working great. Oh, man, I had a family member who was dropping weight, and everyone was telling her to keep doing whatever she was doing. She was doing Walter White crystals. Thankfully, quit it soon. She couldn't afford it. So yeah, none of us use that phrase anymore. With anyone. I lost a bunch of weight when I had undiagnosed type 1 diabetes. Some people flattered my weight loss, but most people said I got really thin and asked if I'm eating all right. Story 21. This is no joke. I had a medical professional say, I used to be a horse addict, so I'm pretty good at this, as she was putting in my IV. I laughed so hard. The plasma place I went to in college seemed to only employ ex-junkies. They were masters of their craft. Then again, like you said, they know what they're doing. Plus, good for them for getting clean. Well, that's one way to turn a hobby into a career. Story 22. My son is about your age and single. Do you want his number? Gynecologist. So while checking out your lady parts, Doc was like, you know who would really like this? My oldest, David. Jacob is more of a butthole guy, but David will love this right here. Story 23. You just hang on right there. We'll get you a wheelchair and be admitted to the hospital. We have to do a colonoscopy, but don't worry, I'll knock you out before sticking a camera up your butt. My GI doc was named, no lie, Dr. Stiff. After my last colonoscopy, he told me in the recovery room, well, that's the last time you're getting stiffed. I'm retiring at the end of the year. I appreciate people who turn their names into verbs. Story 24. When I was 12, I had a dentist say, hold on, I think I might be counting wrong. You shouldn't have those yet. Okay, never mind, those are definitely your wisdom teeth. Your mouth is just huge, I guess. They said it was the youngest they'd ever seen anyone get their wisdom teeth. They called in every dentist in the building to come look at my mouth. You're a prodigy. Story 25. Following a checkup, we're going to have to remove your testicles. Just kidding, you should have seen your face. Did you go to Dr. Leo Spaceman? Sounds like you could use a little R&R. Rum and Ritalin. Story 26. I told an OB-GYN during an exam my husband and I had just started trying to get pregnant, and she said, are you tracking your cycle or just fracking all the time? Hearing that come out of a small elderly black woman was freaking hilarious. She was close to retirement and had zero filter. Miss her.
Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.